Great. Now I'll hand the meeting over to Chair Boatwright.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I am calling this meeting to order at 4:33 p.m. in accordance with the Building Emissions Reduction and Disclosure Ordinance, Boston City Code Ordinances, Section 7-3.2. The BERDO Review Board will hold a virtual public meeting at 4:30 p.m. on March 9th to review the following topics in regard to the reduction of greenhouse gases from building energy production and consumption, so as to promote the public health and welfare of Boston residents. In accordance with the Massachusetts Executive Order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, we are conducting this public meeting online. The public may access this call through Zoom or telephone. For the record, I am Jessica Boatwright, chairperson of the board, and I will now conduct a roll call of board members. Board members, please say your name in the order that they appear on the slide. Jessica Boatwright, and handing it over to Stephen Ellis.
Stephen Ellis.
Hassan Faruqi.
Gail Lattimore.
Reginald Stovall.
Brian Worrell.
Thank you, and welcome to Councilor Royal to his first meeting on the board. Staff will now introduce themselves.
Hi, Hannah Payne.
Diana Vasquez.
Hi everyone, Claudia Diaz Martinez.
Thank you. Unfortunately, Ziggy Chen is not available to be here today, but she did a lot of fantastic work prepping us for a very good meeting. So here's the agenda for today's meeting. We're going to start with a vote on a solar exemption request application. Then we will discuss and vote on the fund's application cycle for this year. And afterward, we will approve the February 9th meeting minutes and hear administrative updates. At the end, we will adjourn the meeting. So we're going to hear some information about a solar exemption request from the Boston Housing Authority. I will hand it over to Claudia for an overview.
Hi everyone. I'm gonna first start with some background on solar energy and solar requirements under BERDO before we go into the application itself. So as a reminder from previous conversations we had on renewable energy, we have very specific requirements for BERDO on which types of solar energy can count for BERDO compliance. In this slide, I'll try to explain the background on why those requirements exist in the first place. So the first thing to know is that when we have a solar array or a solar farm, there are three types of products that we have to think about. The first one is the electricity that is produced by the solar array itself. And this can be directly delivered to a building when we have on-site solar behind the meter. For example, this is the classic instance of rooftop solar. Or the solar farm can simply deliver electricity directly to the grid. The second product that solar farms produce are renewable energy certificates or RECs. These are used for renewable energy accounting purposes. So in practice, a company, an entity, even a government cannot claim that they have used renewable energy if they had not retained and retired renewable energy certificates from the renewable energy market. So this is more like an accounting mechanisms that we use across countries and different types of organizations to take credit for renewable energy. Then in the case of solar, we have a third product that we call solar net metering credits that are used for billing purposes. So this is what actually shows up in an Eversource bill, and that helps building owners that have contracted with solar providers that have installed solar on site to actually see cost savings in their bills. So this can show up in different ways in an Eversource bill. But for example, for on-site solar systems connected to a building, this will show up as a kilowatt hour credit that is directly shown in the bill. And for solar farms that are not connected directly to your building, you will see a dollar credit that is being credited to your account for Eversource. So again, as I just mentioned, under most renewable energy accounting standards, this is totally separate from just the BERDO ecosystem. An entity cannot claim that they have used renewable energy without retiring the associated renewable energy certificates that were produced by a solar farm or a wind farm. However, in Massachusetts, to get funding from the state to install solar or enter into new solar agreements, there is the SMART program that is run by the state, and as an exchange for getting incentives for your solar project, you are not allowed to keep those renewable energy certificates for yourself to take credit for that renewable energy. Instead, those regs are retained by the program and used by utilities to comply with their own renewable energy requirements. During the BERDO regulations development process, this was raised as an issue for building owners because a lot of building owners rely on this SMART funding to be able to afford to install or enter into community solar agreements, for example. And we didn't want to penalize building owners that would have relied on SMART funding to be able to use renewable energy or solar in this case. So in order to avoid penalizing those owners that rely on their SMART program, and in order to incentivize solar development inside of Boston, BERDO regulations specifically allow BERDO building owners to still take credit for solar energy, even if they don't retain and retire the associated renewable energy certificate, if that solar system is located in Boston. So we're saying, if you are installing solar energy in Boston, we are not checking or care if you have the associated regs for that solar power. You can still take credit for that under BERDO. BERDO also grandfathered or allowed solar systems that were already in use before the regulations were passed to still be used for BERDO compliance. So solar systems that were located outside of Boston but started operations before 2024, and for which building owners were already receiving solar net metering credits for before 2024, are still eligible for BERDO compliance. Last year, we came back to the board and the APCC to be able to allow an exemption process for this last requirement, because we heard from multiple building owners who experienced delays or extenuating circumstances in getting solar projects online before the 2024 cutoff. That exemption is what we're going to hear about today. Next slide, please. This is just another way to look at solar systems under BERDO. In the market, when you're trying to install or contract with solar providers, you will find a lot of market names for solar, from community solar, virtual power purchase agreements, virtual net metering credit agreements. There's many ways that we can talk about solar and the market mechanisms to get that solar. To simplify that, under BERDO, we classify solar energy into two big buckets. One, on-site solar located behind the meter. This is, again, when the solar panel is installed on the property and it's connected directly to your building, so electricity is delivered directly to the building itself. Because on-site solar in this case would have to be located on-site on a BERDO building. That means that these systems are always located in Boston, so therefore they're always eligible to be used for BERDO compliance without rec retirement. And in the bottom, you can just see how the credits for the solar energy produced by an on-site solar system would show up on an Eversource bill, which, as you can see, we can actually discern a kilowatt hour amount that is being used to reduce the amount of money that a building owner is paying for their Eversource bill. The other big bucket we call solar net metering credits. This is for any system where electricity is delivered directly to the grid and not to the building itself. These can be community solar, power purchase agreements, virtual net metering agreements. Again, there are different names that you will find these in the market, but for intents and purposes under BERDO, we just call it solar net metering credits. And this is the case that is only eligible without rec retirement if the system is located in Boston, or it started operations before 2024, or if it received an exemption from the review board. And at the bottom, you can see how those net metering credits are reflected in an Eversource bill. As you can see, there is not kilowatt hour amount associated with that solar energy. This is simply shown as a dollar discount in an Eversource bill. Next slide. So given that, now I will move to a summary of the application that was submitted by the Boston Housing Authority. In this case, the Boston Housing Authority, or BHA, is seeking an exemption for 5 solar farms located in eastern Massachusetts, which you can see in the table on the left. In this case, the BHA is working with 3 different solar providers across these 5 solar farms. One of the solar farms, the one that you can see at the bottom, has already started operations, but it did so in 2025, while the other 4 solar farms are expected to begin operations later this year. Based on the submission from the BHA, we categorize or organize our extenuating circumstances into 4 buckets, and I will explain each of those in this presentation. So the first one is a long and complex procurement process that the BHA had to go through to contract with different solar providers. The second circumstance was receiving a lack or not being able to receive or a lack of proposals for solar developments that were located inside of Boston or that include the retirement of Mass Class 1 regs as part of the same contract. The third circumstance are the financial constraints that the BHA faces to pursue other types of renewable energy purchases, such as simply buying unbundled Mass Class 1 regs in the market. And finally, there were delays in the start of operations of the 5 solar farms that are part of this application, which were beyond the BHA's control. And now I'll go in depth to each of these circumstances. So first, as I mentioned, the BHA had a very extensive procurement process to contract with different solar providers. They initiated a comprehensive request for proposals process, or RFP process, to solicit eligible solar net metering credits in 2023, so even before the 2024 cutoff. This RFP process, as you may have been able to see in the application package, was led by Pure Source Consulting and Renewables Worldwide, which, as they stated in their letter of attestation, assisted the BHA with extensive outreach to different solar providers. Altogether, this procurement process, including solicitation, the proposal review process, analysis, negotiation, and final contract or awards, took close to 2 years. The second circumstance was that while the RFP itself, or the types of contracts that the BHA was open to agree with, included all types of different solar agreements that are eligible under BERDO, including solar net metering contracts that would be bundled with Mass Class 1 regs, or that would include that component of reg retirement. They also solicited proposals for solar farms located inside of Boston and that would always be eligible without reg retirement, or that were generated by solar farms outside of Boston that started operations before 2024. And the BHA did receive multiple proposals related to solar net metering credits, a lot of proposals that would function under the SMART program that I mentioned in the slides before, and a virtual power purchase agreement. However, the BHA did not receive any offers that would bundle solar net metering credits with Mass Class 1 regs, or that would offer only Mass Class 1 regs on their own. And given that a lot of the offers relied on SMART funding, I'll just reiterate here that in these cases, solar developers are unable to retain the Mass Class 1 regs that are generated by the solar farms. As a third circumstance, the BHA also explored purchasing unbundled Mass Class 1 regs through other means, in addition to the solar net metering credit contracts. However, this was deemed unfeasible for the BHA due to financial constraints. This is because purchasing only unbundled Mass Class 1 regs would simply represent a cost for the BHA, and they're unable to recover costs through utility savings in the same way that solar net metering credits allowed them to do. So this was deemed as a strategy that would risk operations and maintenance funding for the housing authority in the long term. In the end, the BHA awarded contracts to 9 community solar developers, and in their compliance roadmap, all of the projects related to these contracts were assumed to become operational by December 31st of 2023. However, 4 of the awarded farms haven't become operational yet, and one of them is already operational but did so in 2025 after the 2024 cutoff. And as mentioned before, these commercial operation date, the delay was beyond the BHA's control. Next slide, please. So as our official staff comments, staff recommends the approval of a solar exemption for the use of net metering credits from the 5 solar farms that were shown in the previous slide. Based on our review, we believe that the Housing Authority provided enough evidence that they pursued good faith efforts to procure eligible renewable energy for BERDO compliance well before 2024. It is also worth noting that in their application, the BHA also explains that using solar net metering credits is seen as a complementary measure, not a substitution to doing on-site improvements to their buildings. And while the Boston Housing Authority is indeed prioritizing on-site decarbonization projects as part of their BERDO compliance strategy, these are ongoing capital projects that will require multiple years to reach completion and see those greenhouse gas emission savings. So procuring renewable energy is a necessary complementary effort for the BHA to reach BERDO compliance in the near term. And also, while the BHA is seeking this exemption for 5 solar farms, their application also mentions that they're exploring the potential for amending other contracts that they have with solar providers to integrate BERDO compliant regs into their strategy and other solutions that would allow them to secure net metering credits from eligible projects in the future as well. We believe that this demonstrates that the BHA has a commitment to pursuing compliance efforts that result in the highest quality renewable energy that would benefit Boston residents and our local communities, while also addressing and being cognizant of their financial restrictions. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Claudia. Before we move on to questions from the board, is there anyone representing the applicant that would like to introduce themselves for the record?
Good afternoon. This is Joel Wool, Deputy Administrator at the Boston Housing Authority, and I'm joined by Amha Abraha, who's our Senior Energy Engineer on our team.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for joining us. So I will now ask each board member if they have any clarifying questions or comments about the application. Thank you to both Joel and Amha for being here today. Can Diana and Claudia, can you just clarify, board questions are addressed to staff, or can board also address questions to the BHA members?
Yeah, I can add. So ideally, the question should be about the application, and so staff is happy to try to answer those questions, but there may be questions that BHA staff is most probably better equipped to answer, and so they're also welcome to answer those.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just wanted to be sure. And my question is just about the requirements for either reporting or compliance if we give an exemption. So particularly because some of the details in the application talk about things coming online later this year. Is there anything about the exemption that would allow us to understand if those newer farms come online this year as planned, or if there are delays? Are we engaged in that, or we give an exemption today and then they sort of manage to the best of their abilities, and we've spoken.
I can take this, but Hannah and Diana, feel free to jump in as well. So the way we would get information for their solar net metering credit use is through annual reporting. So the BERDO reporting form asks every building owner if they have used renewable energy. Solar energy is part of the options that they can choose. And then within that bucket of solar energy, they need to report if it was from on-site solar behind the meter or solar net metering credits. For solar net metering credits, they also have to provide evidence of whether that they meet the BERDO requirements that are the default of if they have a solar exemption. So we would catch through annual reporting the moment in which different buildings from the BHA start receiving those solar net metering credits.
Okay, so we wouldn't necessarily know if the 2026 farms come online, but we would know how many credits BHA is using. Okay. All right. I will move on to Board Member Ellis.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Joel and Anha, for attending. I really don't have any questions for you. I think Claudia, you did a pretty good job at laying out the overall aspects of the application, as well as reminding us why we have these flexibility options available to, in this case, BHA. So as I said, no questions. So thank you for the presentation. Back to you, Chair.
Great, thank you, Board Member Faruqi.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll join the chair in welcoming Councilor Worrell to the board as well. Really appreciated this application, and the narrative especially answered all of my questions. So none at this time. I'll yield back. Thanks.
Thank you. Board Member Lattimore.
Yes, thank you. And I also welcome the counselor to this review board. And thanks to the BHA, I did review it. So thank you, Joel and Anha. I wondered just one question that's, peripheral but related, is, how much cost savings will the BHA realize as a result of, these solar contracts that were executed, if any? If there's a way to quantify that. Or will there be a cost saving?
To the chair of the board, and is it all right to just respond directly there?
Oh, yes, please. Sorry. Go right ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Boatwright and Member Lattimore. So the BHA will receive substantial cost savings with our solar contracts for community solar. It is a little bit confusing to calculate, I must admit, because the contracts are different percentile savings based on what is produced in the whole. And that the savings ranges from roughly 10 to 30%, depending on which contract and the amount of specific energy. However, for the universe that we're talking about today with the exemption request, I believe at the time of award, we estimated about $1 million annually. Some of those to federal sites would get shared with HUD, but I would say it is no question that it is hundreds of thousands of dollars, changing somewhat based on electricity rates over time. But that it's a very substantial savings, and that is going to, just to maybe answer the follow-up question if there is one, operating savings, which is sort of paying staff, paying for maintenance, repairing doors, hiring extermination, that kind of thing. So it's very much like the savings to ways that tenants see and feel in terms of housing quality.
Great. No, thank you. That's really helpful. Just and this again is somewhat peripheral, but curious. It's for me a learning opportunity as well, perhaps. In the application, the consultant letter that was included in the application talked about that there's a public entity net metering cap. And I wasn't familiar with that public entity net metering cap, and I don't know if you, Joel, or know more about this, but just it sounds like the BHA is at that cap, or I'm just curious if you know anything about that.
That's correct. So historically, um, um, historically, net metering, the amount of solar that can be net metered in a utilities, like an electric company's service territory. So like in Eversource in Eastern Massachusetts or NSTAR before it was Eversource, right? It was said there's a cap on net metering generally. And public entities got a partial carve out from that, which both was sort of up created a higher ceiling, but also um, as solar compensation has been reduced over time, the public entity compensation rate has tended to be higher because it is in the public interest, right, for affordable housing in this case. So BHA with some of these net metering awards is approaching that 10 megawatt cap or nearly, I think we'll be at it with some of these coming online. Um, and there are um, we are certainly part of a constituent body that's hoping that there will be increased flexibility on that public entity cap because as was shared in such a detailed form by the city staff earlier, net metering, while the state has generally been transitioning to the SMART program, net metering does allow for the potential for also purchasing or owning the RECs in the same contractual vehicle. And one of the things that we're hoping to do with a few of these contracts, with at least one of the vendors, with some of the solar farms, is to amend those contracts and so that they incorporate a partial REC purchase. But that's as was detailed, that's only possible under net metering. It's not really possible under SMART because I think it's the utility company that owns those credits for like 20 years. So sorry to respond at length, but the short of it is that we are a host customer, signed up with the vendor, signed up with the DPU, if you will, for a significant portion of, we're an anchor customer of these community solar farms. They get a specific compensation rate based on being affiliated with a public entity, and that is a limited amount at 10 megawatts.
Got it. No, that was really helpful. Thank you, Joel. I appreciate that. And just real quick, and then I'm done. And to get the increase or the raise in the public entity net metering cap, which makes sense to me, is that regulated by the state, DPU, or federal? Who regulates that?
That is would require the legislature, the state legislature.
Oh, okay, got it. Okay, thank you. I'm all set.
Thank you. Board Member Stovall?
Yes, I didn't have too much to contribute to that. I read the report that you sent us earlier in the notes, and not really too much I can ask. Thank you for putting such a good presentation together, and informing us. And I'm all set. I'll yield back the floor.
Thank you. Councilor Worrell?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the members of the board for welcoming me to the board, and thank you to the BHA for their presentation. I have no questions. The application and the presentation covered it all for me. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So I will leave a minute if there are any further discussions or questions from board members. Sounds like we're in pretty good shape. If there are not any further discussions or questions, is there a motion to approve the Boston Housing Authority's application for a solar exemption?
So moved.
I second it.
Thank you. Great. So there is a motion to approve from Board Member Lattimore, seconded by Board Member Stovall. On the motion to approve Boston Housing Authority's application for solar exemption, how do you vote? I'll call on you alphabetically. Please vote in favor, opposed, or abstain. I vote in favor. Board Member Ellis?
In favor.
Board Member Faruqi?
In favor.
Board Member Lattimore?
In favor.
Board Member Stovall,
In favor?
Board Member Worrell.
In favor.
The ayes have it. The motion passes. Boston Housing Authority's solar exemption request has been approved. Thank you to the applicant for the thorough application and for your work on this matter. And the Environment Department will follow up with you on next steps.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. So we will now discuss and vote on the Equitable Emissions Investment Fund 2026 application cycle for this year, and I will hand it over to Diana for some information and background.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, everyone. So I'll present on a proposal for this year's Equitable Emissions Investment Fund. I'll just, well, maybe with some prepared background, you may remember we sort of put out some general feelers or proposals to the board and then asked board members to give us feedback via a Google form. So I'm just going to review the feedback we received and the proposal that we've made based on that feedback and sort of like highlight any changes or updates that were made because of the feedback we received. So up top, I just want to say the proposal we're going to put forth today is that the review board allocate $600,000 for this year's application cycle of the Equitable Emissions Investment Fund, with a preference to grant multiple awards up to $200,000, with the intention to open the application on March 30th and close the application on June 1st of this year. As a quick reminder of the eligibility in order to apply for the fund, any applicant must be a nonprofit organization or an organization with a fiscal sponsor. Any of the project proposals that are submitted must include some sort of building emissions reduction component as part of the project, and project proposals must have a public purpose, so they must serve a public purpose. And on the right side, we have the evaluation criteria that the review board uses when reading through the project proposals. So, as I mentioned, emissions reductions are required, but other co-benefits that could be evaluated are benefits to affordable housing, benefits to tenants, benefits to labor and workforce development, benefits to outdoor air quality and indoor air quality, climate resilience benefits, energy justice benefits, and any other benefits that the review board finds that helps forward the sort of intention of BERDO. So very quickly, I wanted to share some of the feedback we received and how we sort of incorporated any of that feedback into our proposal. So the first question we asked is whether board members agreed with releasing $600,000 with a preference to release multiple awards of 200,000. All of the feedback received was generally in favor, with one sort of caveat, the caveat being they wanted the language to be flexible enough to award multiple projects of up to $200,000 each and not make an intention of only awarding 3 projects with $200,000 each. So this just gives us more flexibility. If an applicant applies for a project proposal for up to $100,000, for example, the board could make that grant. So the language is with the preference of awarding multiple projects of up to $200,000 per project. That does not guarantee that they get the full 200,000 if they apply for less money or if the board decides to grant less money. So just providing a little bit more flexibility there. The second sort of question that we asked was whether the board agreed with the condition that grantees are expected to spend down their award within 3 years. So we received some feedback about inquiring how the Community Preservation Act team or the CPA team communicates this. They have a 2-year spend down requirement. And so that small text on the left-hand side at the bottom of the slide is the language that the CPA uses. They sort of categorize it as a readiness to proceed. So they ask applicants to tell them sort of explain that the project is in fact ready to proceed with like planning documents, maybe construction estimates, timelines, that sort of thing. And if they do exceed that 2-year timeline, the grantee must submit a sort of formal extension, typically after a meeting with the CPA staff. So with that in mind, we put in our the proposal in the grant itself, or in the grant application itself, would be a question that's similarly that informs applicants that they are expected to spend down the funds within 3 years. And all grantees, including the ones from the past two cycle, have to provide quarterly updates. So every 3 months, they have to provide an update to the staff around timelines, accomplishments, any delays, those sort of things. And then they also, if they exceed the grant agreement timeline, they have to submit a formal grant extension that includes a justification for the grant extension. So why is the grant deadline having to be extended? So those are the things that would be happening within the Equitable Emissions Investment Fund. The third question we asked is whether there was a preference for buildings that are subject to BERDO, or just any buildings that could receive sort of benefits from a project proposal. Generally, there was no strong preference, with one vote voting for buildings subject to BERDO. So we are stating that in the application there is a preference for projects that impact buildings that are subject to BERDO. We also asked if there was a preference for types of projects prioritized this cycle. There seemed to be a mix of responses with a small preference for energy efficiency improvements in fuel switching. So we are also planning to include language on a preference for projects that include energy efficiency and or fuel switching. And just a quick reminder, that does not preclude other project types from being submitted as well. So we just sort of indicating to applicants that there's a preference for these, but this does not mean other project types could not be submitted. And then we had sort of like an open-formed additional questions. So the first additional question we received, that there was support for requiring projects to be beyond the sort of scoping and assessing stage. These projects, I guess, in other words, are more like shovel ready. Because it's something we highlight in the application as well, is that these projects are better served by the Building Decarbonization Advisor Program, or BDAP as we affectionately call it. BDAP sort of provides a complementary zero over time plan to nonprofit organizations by pairing them up with an engineering firm, and that engineering firm then works with them to sort of set up their zero over time plan. So that application form process is much less lengthy, much lighter lift, and we rather folks go to that if they're in the planning or scoping phase. And so we plan to include language that says that. There's also support for projects that include engagement and capacity building. And so I just wanted to remind everyone that under the project activities and scope section of the application, it asks for a full list of tasks expected to be completed from the project. And that can include engagement and information sessions with tenants if applicable, and other things like that. So we could add language that says, the review board may view that more favorably if there are like engagement plans for bigger projects. I will say it depends on the type of project. Some projects tend to be smaller, so they may not have as much time, like a big timeline, but those things are included as one of the questions in the application. Um, and so, yes, although all projects must include a building emissions mitigation component, projects that include engagement plans may be viewed as more strong by the review board. And then lastly, there were like questions and suggestions regarding how to include workforce development sort of co-benefits. So we've added to the draft application this specific language regarding workforce and hiring practices. If your project involves hiring a contractor, vendor, or service provider, describe any internal policies you maintain or plan to maintain for this project proposal regarding hiring minority and women-owned business enterprises, or MWBE, or Boston-based small businesses as contractors, vendors, service providers, etc. We can wordsmith it a little bit, but essentially asking about any sort of plans to sort of maintain a MWPE policy, or hiring small Boston-based businesses, um, if part of their project includes hiring service providers. And then just a quick sort of review of the conditions. So in addition to any standard grant conditions from the city, grantees are expected to commit to the following. So one, reporting. As I mentioned, most grantees are expected to submit a progress report and or final report, depending on the length of their project timeline. Most so far have done both. So we sort of we meet with the grantees and agree on a milestone. And once that milestone is hit, we ask for a progress report, and then we release more of their grant funding. And once the project is final and complete, we ask for a final report, and then we release the final 10% of the funding. So it's a staggered amount that gets released based on their progress report and final report. In addition to those formal reportings, we also have quarterly check-ins. So we ask for a main point of contact for each project, and every 3 months, we ask for a quarterly check-in, really highlighting any changes or any delays, any accomplishments. Are they ahead of schedule? Are they behind of schedules? Those sort of things, so that we can really stay on top of tracking of the project. And then for any award that contributes to a physical change to a building that the applicant themselves owns, they must maintain the work and public access to that work for a minimum of 15 years. So that is also a condition that if they receive money that includes any physical changes to a building that they own, it's expected that that access and that work would be maintained for a minimum of 15 years. And this is just another way of highlighting the proposed timeline. So opening the application at the end of this month, March 30th, and then closing it for June 1st, with an application review cycle in between July and August, and with the intention of announcing awards in September. So again, wanted to highlight the proposal language here, that the review board allocates $600,000 for the 2026 application cycle, with a preference to grant multiple awards of up to $200,000, with the intention to open the application on March 30th and close on June 1st of this year. I will now hand it over back to you, Chair, if there are any questions.
Great, thank you. I will now do questions and comments. I have a couple of questions, and then I will ask each board member if they have any additional questions and comments. First, just thank you to the staff for all your work to get us ready for this. I think we had a really rich conversation last time. And I think this is a really good organization of our feedback. I also want to just recognize my fellow board members for providing input to get us to, I think, some really strong enhancements. Can you just remind us what the application timeline was last year in terms of how much time people have to respond this year versus last year?
Yes, so the application cycle was open for 2 months, so it'd be very similar to this proposal is very similar to last year's proposal.
Okay. And also, it seems to me like we are making some good changes to strengthen responses, but I don't see anything that I imagine is going to make the application itself either much easier or much harder to complete. I know that there is this one piece, which is that people have to use a new grant making system. So I just wanted to confirm from the staff perspective that that given the new system and any other changes, there isn't anything that's going to make this a more difficult lift for applicants.
Yes, that's a great flag. Thank you, Chair, for flagging that. So in the past, we've used a Google form to sort of be the submission mechanism with some additional questions, and then primarily reviewed would be more like a project proposal sort of written out. Um, our City Hall grants team, so the central grants team for all of City Hall, has procured what is a platform called WiseHive. And WiseHive is sort of meant to be a more streamlined platform. So the applicant themselves will have to make an account, but once they have an account, it'll allow them to apply for any grants across the city that are in WiseHive. So it's sort of like a one and done. and it'll have all of their information, including like their vendor ID, their IRS tax documents, and those sort of things. So on one hand, it's supposed to help streamline the application process for the applicant, which is great. We love that. And for the reviewer as well. So as reviewers, you will also have to make accounts, but then you'll be able to go in and directly review the applications directly in WiseHive, and we'll be able to sort of collate that much more quickly. As you remember, last year we were using Google Sheets, so WiseHive will be able to centralize that a little bit better for us. So there shouldn't be any additional lift. If anything, we're hoping that it actually makes things a little bit more streamlined for the applicants. There is a way to sort of see all of the questions in advance, so they could even like, print it out and then go back in and submit it all. But there shouldn't be a significant lift for the applicants.
Okay, great. Thank you. I will pass it on to Board Member Ellis.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Diana, for the presentation. I didn't say it last time, but I'll welcome Councilor Worrell, so I apologize. I did not say that with my fellow board members. Nevertheless, one thing that I want to appreciate is the flexibility in the language, especially saying multiple as opposed to three. I think that is what allowed us to be able to fund the 4 projects that we had funded in the last application cycle. So thank you for that update of the language. I just wanted to get clarification. I know I have it somewhere at home, but I don't have it in front of me right now. Can you remind me, excluding the existing funding or projected funding from the Equitable Emissions Investment Fund, if we were to spend the full $600,000, how much money would remain in the Equitable Emissions Investment Fund?
So we currently have 1.28 million that are not already committed. To do some quick math, I believe that would be about $680,000.
Okay. So yeah, that's something that I'm gonna keep on my mind for a little bit here because what I'm noticing, this is the 3rd year of the application cycle with roughly, I'm just gonna call it 600,000 because who knows what can happen with the 80, for other projects and opportunities, and wanted to make sure that the environment staff always has the opportunity to come to the board to let us know, this project or initiative, such as I believe BDAP, are opportunities for the way that we can spend the fund. However, it is dawning on me, or quite somewhat of a reality that's sort of showing up right now, that this is potentially the second to last year that we would be doing funding for projects or initiatives through the traditional Equitable Emissions Investment Fund cycle. We still are not clear on where additional funding could come from. I don't want to sit here and say that we will be relying on ACPs or alternative compliance payments, but I just want it noted that, that I'm slightly concerned about that, but I want to hear from, the city staff, what are your thoughts about this seeming like, I'm not saying it will be, but this seeming like the second to last year that we may be doing funding as a result of this pool of money that we have access to.
I'm happy to chime in, but
I see
please.
him.
Oh, okay.
I'm happy to answer that. I think it's accurate to say that from the funding that we have from the 3.5 million that was seeded in the fund, this would be the second to last grant making opportunity we could do if we want to make a similar size of grants in the next round. Our intention is certainly to be able to continue this grant making process. It's an essential part of BERDO, and we do intend to be collecting alternative compliance payments. How much we'll get in is still yet to be determined. So that does leave a really big question mark in terms of what could those future years look like. But that's certainly our goal is to be able to continue to make grants like this from the Equitable Emissions Investment Fund going forward. But you are correct to see that we are quickly running out of the money that has been seated initially for this.
Thank you, Hannah. And in a way, that's a good thing. I don't want to paint it as such a negative thing here. It's just that, knowing that this is the first inaugural year of the BERDO, review board, and we're about to enter a second iteration, which, Diana will talk about later, I'm assuming, maybe. I just wanted to, shed some light on that the first round of this review board in its 3 years has, yeah, spent a good amount of money, which, again, is a good thing, but it is also concerning if we do not have a sense of how that pool will be replenished. So, with that being said, I want to pledge my support as we continue to go down the line with this, but that's all the questions and comments that I have for right now. So, I'll turn it back over to you, Chair.
Great. Thank you. Board Member Faruqi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yeah, thank you to the city staff and all of my colleagues on the board for our great discussion last time, and as well as to Diana and Ziggy for meeting with me afterward to discuss ways that we can, in particular, really use this fund to invest in our minority-owned business enterprises, as well as in workers here in the city. And so I appreciate the language. I think this is on like slide 19 or something, the prior slide, around minority business enterprise use. So this is, I think, a great step. What I would like to see added as well is language that addresses not just the business contractor use, but also the workers that will be employed on these projects and funded by this funding. I think similar language to what we've seen here at the very bottom would be like a great, minimum step, which is to say that the applicant could, share more information about different aspects of their hiring practices. The City of Boston's Climate Ready Workforce Action Plan had made some recommendations as to what those are, and I'll quote this from the plan, which is page 154. The review board must consider benefits, including living wages, equitable employment, and contracting standards, and the impact of local workforce development programs. So I think adding language like that, just at the disclosure level, would allow sufficient flexibility for the applicants. As I mentioned last meeting, obviously different applicants are they already have their own situations going on. They may have contractors they work with or standing project labor agreements. And so we are not necessarily trying to get in the middle of that, but having information would be a welcome change from what we've sometimes seen in the past. And certainly would allow us as review board members to make a more informed decision once that time comes. So I'm happy to offer that as an amendment to this, after we hear from all of my colleagues. My final question, building on Board Member Ellis's point, which is a very good one on the alternative compliance payments. I'm curious when within this year we'll have a clearer sense of how much money we'll take in ACPs, and if that'll happen at some time that'll coincide within the decision-making process for this fund.
Apologies, I was having trouble with my mute button. Chair, I can answer that. Um, um, so reporting is due May 15th of this year. That's when we'll determine emissions compliance as well. There will be a little bit of a process to do that as we have data quality flags that we run on all reported and verified data. So that's like if anything looks out of the ordinary, the verifier and the reporter will be notified and we'll have to resolve those issues. Once that is completed, then the emission status will be reflected in our reporting portal and like in Touchstone, our database that we use. And then at that point, owners will be able to tell us if they intend to come into compliance through an alternative compliance payment. And here's where it gets a little bit clunky. They will request an invoice. We then have to create the invoice in our city financial systems and send it to them. So there will be a little bit of delay there. But I think we should have a good sense by May of, the folks that are kind of the most proactive doing that, who's intending to make alternative compliance payments, what's that ballpark, then I think we'll have more straggling in as, we follow up with folks who maybe haven't reported and they start getting angry letters that are like, you have not complied with this. And then they look at their compliance options and see, oh, my alternative compliance payments are reasonable. I'm just going to pay that and be done with this and come into compliance. So I do think it will trickle in over time, but I think we'll have a good sense of like, if we're talking about like a sizable amount of money to be able to do a, similar award size that we have done the previous years, or a smaller amount than that in the spring. I would say June-ish.
Great, great, great. That's excellent. Thank you so much. That's super helpful. So yeah, I think to respond to Board Member Ellis's point, by the time we're evaluating the applications, we'll at least have a sense of the scale, if not the exact dollar amount of the ACPs. And so I would feel comfortable moving forward with this proposal right now, and certainly understanding that if we get to a point in the later part of this year where we recognize that actually we're not going to have very much money at all to give out in the future, then we can vote to give out either a fewer number of grants or smaller grants to begin with, to preserve the funding. But certainly, if we have funding, I think we should give it out. And certainly there's a lot of need out in the community for this. So appreciate that and appreciate the opportunity to make sure this is also helping to build wealth for our residents and for our small businesses. With that, I'll yield back to the chair.
Thank you. Board Member Lattimore.
Yes, thank you. I also think it was well formed. I appreciate the work that the staff have done. I also appreciate and want to echo what Board Member Faruqi has said about the WMBE utilization piece. I was happy to see that again, or at least emphasize. I wondered, just to follow up on some of his comments in terms of if it's stated in the application that that is something that is an evaluative measure, or at least something that the city is looking for. I wonder if it makes sense to provide not any referrals, but resources for that to applicants. So, for example, I know that Mass Housing Investment Corp has a pretty extensive WMBE utilization list, and just wondered if the application should link to that list or link to the Mass Minority Contractors Association. I'm not sure of the legalities of having that type of thing in the application, but just a way to kind of encourage people to understand where they can go or what potential resources or sources they have to kind of meet the goal of MWBE hiring and or local hiring. So that's just a suggestion. Not sure how it lines up with the legal aspects of the application. Otherwise, I don't have any other comments. Thank you.
Chair, may I quickly respond
Yeah.
to that? I think those are great suggestions. And what I would recommend, Board Member Lattimore, is if you have specific examples of organizations that have maintained those lists or are, good resources, if you could send them to the staff and we can take a look and have that conversation of whether we can point to them. I know for certain that we can always direct people to the supplier diversity portal that the City of Boston maintains and the Commonwealth maintains. But I also recognize there are limitations in that because of the, type of work that is being done. So there might be more appropriate places to direct folks to that have kind of more of the specific jobs that people will be utilizing for this work, like contractor work and things like that. So if you send those our way, we will take a look at that. And I would like to try
Yes.
to include them, but we'll have to look at it before I can confirm
Got
yes or
it.
no.
No, thank you. And I appreciate the reminder of the city and states supply diversity portal, which is an important resource as well. But yes, I will send the contacts that I know of, at least at those particular agencies that I just spoke of to you. Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Stovall.
Thank you. There's not really too much that I can add to what everybody ahead of me has said. I just was curious how the city handles their minority women business. I mean, don't you have like a quota you have to initiate every year or every quarter or something like that? I'm just curious.
I can attempt to answer that, but I think we will probably need to follow up because
Okay.
I am not the
Well,
expert on this, but
okay,
I will
okay.
say there are there is the Boston resident jobs policy that applies to like city funded construction projects. So that does set um, goals like targets for how many Boston residents you're hiring, how many minority like, journeymen and apprentices you're hiring, and women on the job site. So that's really for construction. For procurement, um, I there are like different requirements that we have to do for certain procurements of, requesting bids from registered minority women-owned businesses. But we could get you more of the specific details on that if you're interested.
Yeah, I just the reason I asked is, you know, I see it differently than everybody else probably here. I see it, the money coming from the city, and the thing is, so much of the money should be spent, or at least given the opportunity should be given to those businesses, seeing as we are providing the money from a budget. That's the only reason why I asked. But that's pretty much all I had to say, and I just wanted to welcome um, our new council member, um, Roel. Thank you for joining, and I'll yield back the floor.
Great. Uh, Thanks. I will hand it directly over to our new member, Councilor Royal.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Member Ellis and Stovall, for welcoming to the board. And yeah, I would definitely love to see how we can, whether it's reporting, similar to what they do in the BRJP, on money spent on the construction. I would love to see how we could factor that in. And then the other thing that I am curious to see if we could make sure that when the applicant applies, that they have the full construction season to be able to hire. Because right now we're taking out like 3 months of the construction season with the application starting from, March to June, I believe it is. So maybe it's in the next iteration, but I could just only imagine like how much harder it would be to find a contractor um, after June and July, after you're awarded. Like, I guess in the next iteration, maybe looking at having the application process from October to March. That way, we're giving the applicant the full construction season to hire and complete as much of the work to be done. Thank you, Chair. No further questions.
Thank you. The scheduling point is well taken. I don't know if any of the board members want to just respond in terms of where projects have been historically when they're applying vis-a-vis like when they would be hiring.
Chair, I'm happy to, or sorry, did you say board members or staff?
Sorry, I meant staff. I was looking at your square.
Oh,
I meant staff.
yes. Okay.
I guess
Yeah,
no one could tell that but me.
Yes. So typically, I mean, I say typically, we've only had two application cycles so far, but in the past two cycles, we've had projects sort of run the spectrum. I would say some of the bigger ones were sort of a mix of their capital stack. So a lot of these projects are already underway and they're looking for sort of supplemental funding to sort of finish out their project. So a lot of times we're actually the projects that get proposed are, already started, maybe in the middle of their timeline, that kind of thing. So typically they're pretty well on their way. I would say the other type of project we get are more like service types of projects. So they provide a service that are not necessarily contingent upon a physical change of a building. Historically, those have not been awarded just yet, except for one from Boston Medical Center. But Boston Medical Center does require installing solar panels, so there is like a little bit of a physical change there. Um, and then I would say the other like third bucket are like much smaller physical changes. So an example would be an affordable housing complex that's doing a um, wasted heat recovery system. So it's you're not really making a significant change, you're more like adding something to the building so that you can like recover that wasted heat and make the building more efficient. And those tend to be much smaller scale. They're not very big construction projects. Um, and those projects typically already have sort of a team in place. They already have a contractor they're working with, for example, who sort of designed it. And so they're more looking for funding to have it, executed. So we're okay in that sense that we tend to be okay in terms of like where the projects are, and not having to bump up against the winter season.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Uh, any further discussions or questions? Calling on board member Ellis first.
Thank you, Chair. Diana, in light of what the council shared, I just wanted to confirm, the city, the environment department's capacity. I know you're a small but mighty team over there. Knowing that late spring is the time for reporting, and that in itself has its own, you know, time consumed and attention grabbing for you all, as well as the fall is where we do a lot of the flexibility application. So I guess I just wanted to confirm that, if you've heard any concerns about the fact that we've only done these applications during the summertime, and has that been a barrier for both applicants, and has that been a burden for you all while you are reviewing, the data that folks are submitting through the BERDO platform. So I just wanted to check on your capacity just to make sure that, do we need a proposal to push this back, or are you all comfortable with the timeline, and do you get a sense that applicants are comfortable with that timeline as well?
Oh, Diana, you're muted.
Sorry. Now that's a great question. Thank you for thinking of us in our capacity. So in terms of the reporting timeline, uh, we are a small but mighty team, and the reporting team is also a small but mighty team. And so we have Aiden and his team is fully dedicated to helping folks get through the reporting process, and as he likes to say, across the finish line. So fortunately, that does free up sort of, the review board side of things, and we are actually pretty okay on that front. So we're fine in terms of the reporting and application sort of running in parallel. Um, in terms from the applicants, I haven't heard any sort of concerns in terms of like the season. Something I have heard, and I think happens a lot, is that they always ask for more time. They're like, "Can we get more time for the
Mhm.
application cycle?" But I don't think it's related to the season, more so to just like wanting more time to prepare the materials. So no concerns from us.
Okay, thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Board member Faruqi.
Thank you. 2 points. First, a question to anyone. Do we have a sense of what the average project completion time is for the projects that have been proposed to the fund?
That's a great question. It sort of depends on the type of project. So, like on the bigger scale, an example would be like Alston and CDC. They did a full deep energy retrofit, right? Like theirs was like a multi-stage, multi-year project where the fund sort of was like due to some federal clawbacks on their grants, the fund sort of like meant to sort of supplement some of the funding that they were expecting, and then was clawed back. And we really came at the very end at the tail end. So they've actually are complete. They've finished all their tasks. But if we were starting from the beginning, it would be a multi-year project, right? And then on the other end, we have sort of like Roxbury Tenants of Harvard that's doing like a wasted heat recovery system. They're expected to be done, they said, by July. Like they think they'll be done by the end of the summer. So it sort of depends on the type of projects. I could do that analysis if that would be helpful to sort of see what the, average timeline based on the project is. Um, but it just sort of depends if is this part of a larger project that the fund is just like kind of being a mix, like a large mix of capital stacks, or is it a smaller project that the fund is helping supplement with some other funding? But I'm happy to do some like analysis on that.
Okay, great. Thank you for the information. And yeah, I think the Councilor Worrell's point is well taken in terms of the construction season. So my thoughts were on if the 3-year timeline for spending down these funds is sufficient, then it would be possible for an applicant to be able to take the money in the fall. Or, I mean, I think in reality, the money actually is received in like January, right? Or sometime later than that. So then they would be able to start later. But I would be open to amending that to say, 4 years instead of 3 years if that, provides the level of flexibility that the contractors and the owners need in this case. Beyond that, my second point was actually to make a motion on to amend the proposed application template whenever appropriate.
Apologies. I was actually going to ask you for the motion because I know that you had I wanted to check back with you in terms of thoughts. So.
Oh, great. Okay. Excellent. Perfect timing then. I can put this in the chat and I can just read it out here. This would be a motion to add language to the application to quote, describe the job quality and standards of workers on this project, including those employed by contractors and subcontractors. And this should include, but not be limited to, living wages, equitable employment and contracting standards, and the impact of local workforce development programs. And I will give tremendous credit to the Office of Worker Empowerment, who has drafted the bulk of that language as well. Thank you. I'll yield back.
Seconded.
Great. Is it okay that that we sort of assumed the first part of that motion without speaking it? So basically, can you go back one slide, I think? I think it was. So basically, the motion is in support of this statement with the additional language that Board Member Furky just shared. Are we in order, Diana?
I think that's a great question. I think technically sorry, Tassan, I do think technically the motion should be written with the amendment of, adding this language, something to that effect.
Great. Okay.
Okay.
Well, if appropriate, then I will, and I'll put this in the chat as well, move to approve the proposal for the 2026 Equitable Emissions Investment Fund to allocate, the review board allocates $600,000 for the 2026 application cycle with a preference to grant multiple awards of up to $200,000 with the intention to open the application on March 30th and close on June 1st, 2026, with the amendment to describe the job quality and standards of workers on this project, including those employed by contractors and subcontractors. And this should include, but not be limited to, living wages, equitable employment and contracting standards, and the impact of local workforce development programs to the application for the fund.
Great, thank you. And good job. And I believe I'm happy to second it, but Board Member Lattimore, I defer to you to re-second it if you
second.
Okay, great. All right. I will now ask board members on the motion to approve the proposal as stated and seconded by Board Member Furky and Board Member Lattimore. How do you vote? In favor, opposed, or abstain? I vote in favor. Board Member Ellis?
In favor.
Board Member Furky?
In favor.
Board Member Lattimore?
In favor.
Board Member Stovall?
In favor.
Councilor Worrell?
In favor.
Great. The ayes have it. The motion passes. The next cycle of the Equitable Emissions Investment Fund will release $600,000 and is planned to be open from March 30th through June 1st, 2026. And I just asked the staff, I guess we do have one meeting before then, but of course, please include us on any announcements so that we can help get the word out about the opportunity. Our third agenda item is approving the previous meeting minutes. Are there any questions or comments regarding the meeting minutes?
Motion to approve.
Great, I will second that. On the motion to approve the meeting minutes, board members can vote in favor, oppose, or abstain either by a show of your actual hand or a Zoom hand, or you can unmute. All in favor, please raise a hand or a button. Okay, all opposed and abstention.
Abstained.
Councilor Royal, since it's your first meeting, I'm gonna assume an abstention.
No, aye.
Okay, great, thanks. And now Diana will give us administrative updates.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I am stepping in for Ziggy, so I'll try to do my best to channel her admin updates. So we have not received any new applications for flexibility measures since our last meeting. I wanted to announce that we have nominations open for the Boston Climate Leader Awards. You may remember from last year, the Environment Department, sort of resurgence or rebirth the Climate Leader Awards, and we are now in that phase again for this year. These awards celebrate businesses, community groups, individuals leading the charge towards a greener, more sustainable Boston. The nomination form is now available on the Boston Climate Leader Awards website. I can put that link in the chat, just so you can check out the different categories. Please, if you know anyone who you think would be a great fit, please feel free to make a submission. The reporting season has officially launched on February 17th, and we've had a webinar on March 2nd to help launch the 2026 reporting season. So the recording for that, yes, here we go. The recording for that can be found on the BERDO website. We also had a renewable energy webinar that's also available on the BERDO website under previous events. We still have some upcoming webinars for a series of webinars, and that is also available on the BERDO website under upcoming events. So we have a previous events and upcoming events, just to make that super clear. We're also hosting BERDO in-person workshops this year. You may remember from last year, the BERDO team went to different neighborhoods, sort of set up shop in different areas where we tried to meet building owners or different folks who had any questions related to BERDO and answer their questions sort of outside of City Hall. So we're hosting those again this year. The first one is actually tomorrow at the Civic Pavilion in downtown Boston, right next to City Hall. The event pages are all available on the BERDO website, and RSVP is not required, but it is encouraged because it helps us get an estimate of how many folks to expect. The next review board meeting is scheduled for March 23rd. And then finally, I will hand it over to Claudia to discuss to give a teaser on some proposed policies and procedures and regulation updates. Oh, sorry, here's the calendar.
Okay, so for this year, as you all know, we love making regulations, fixes, and making sure that we are keeping up and improving BERDO over time as we figure out new issues or barriers our building owners are facing during the implementation of BERDO. So we have a more narrow scope of regulatory fixes that we're planning to introduce this year. As you may remember from last regulations update last year, policies and procedures are now under the authority of the BERDO Review Board, so we would come to you for the approval of any updates for policies and procedures. For this year, we're envisioning some narrow updates to Appendix A of our policies and procedures, which is the appendix that matches property types in Portfolio Manager to the building use classifications that we have under BERDO. So we're expecting to bring that proposal to you in the next meeting that we have in March, in 2 weeks. And in April, we are planning to come to the Air Pollution Control Commission, which, as you may remember, is the entity that has the regulatory authority over BERDO and can approve BERDO regulations, with some proposed updates to requirements for the retirement of Mass Class 1 RECs after launching our Mass Class 1 REC connector program this year. We identified that the timeline for building owners to be able to buy and then retire Mass Class 1 RECs retroactively to come into compliance with the prior compliance year is very narrow. For example, this year, March 1st was the deadline to buy Mass Class 1 RECs through our program. But reporting, as you know, is not due until May 15. So we're hoping to add flexibility so that building owners are able to buy Mass Class 1 RECs for a longer period of time. And we are also hoping to come with some regulatory fixes related to enforcement so that all procedures are better aligned with the state regulations that we will follow for enforcement. And I'll pass it back to Diana.
I think that's it from us, Chair.
Great. Are there any questions from the board on the admin updates?
Not a question, but something I just want to make sure that we're all aware of. I was just made aware today that on March 11th, the City Council has on their agenda a resolution to temporarily roll back BERDO and the stretch energy codes for 5 years. I don't have any particular comments, but I do know that it will be on the floor as part of a discussion. I just wanted to check for the environment staff if they have anything that they want to make us aware of or what they may know about this upcoming resolution that is being put to the floor.
Happy to respond to that. I don't have any more details. It is an item before the council. I think that is all accurate. If folks are interested in looking it up, it's on the agenda for Wednesday's council meeting. But I don't have anything beyond that to share.
Thank you, Hannah. Yeah, I'll try my best to watch and see, what this may lead to. I do note that they are combining both BERDO and the energy stretch codes together, which I'm not going to say anything about that right now, but just wanted to make you all aware. So thank you.
I can't find my hand to raise, but Chair, I'm raising my hand.
Councilor Morrell.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, there is a resolution on the agenda. Resolutions are non-binding. However, it is the wrong signal to be given to the city of Boston when we have created or have led the way with our regulations. So just want to also let the public know and the board know that these are non-binding resolutions, but they do send signals but again, non-binding resolutions.
Thank you. Thank you to both of you for bringing that up today. Any additional questions or comments?
No, just a comment. I appreciate knowing that as well, and had no idea that was on the docket for the city council, and I will try to listen in on that as well. But it's in terms of non-binding council, that means no, even if the resolution passes, there are no changes to the current regulations. Is that what that means?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. I'll follow up with you separately. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also want to say thank you to the counselor for making that clear. Because I was wondering what should we make of a resolution if it is in support. So I appreciate hearing your words on that.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, everyone. I may see some of you in the audience on March 11th, but we will reconvene in 2 weeks. So I will make a motion to adjourn our meeting.
Second.
There's a second. Great. If you are in favor, you can unmute or raise your hand or raise your Zoom hand and say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right. The ayes have it. The motion passes. This meeting is adjourned at 5:57 p.m. on March 9th. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Good night.
Thanks. Good night.